What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ammunition, and today, home defense. The right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world, first-hand experience. Now, I'm going to put in a version of the bio, but before I do, today on Alpha Male Podcast, I put out an episode about home security, home hardening, securing your home against people with evil intent. Now, I think per the stats, not everybody that listens to Gunfighter Life listens to Alpha Male Podcast, but these tie in together today, so you may want to go check that out on Alpha Male Podcast. But I thought doing this on guns and ammunition for home defense would tie in nicely to that. I'll put in a quick version of the bio since, first and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Professional big game hunter and guide. If you feel called to support, check out Patreon. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I am your host, Michael Milito, and I am blessed to serve you today. Okay, let's talk a little bit about home defense firearms and some myths and misconceptions, I think, about home defense firearms. And this doesn't just apply to home defense or to women, but I see it very commonly in this space. A man is doing a noble thing and he wants his wife to have some kind of protection for the home when he's away, to protect herself, her loved ones, maybe children, maybe somebody else in the house, and to protect property. He goes out and gets a very small subcompact firearm. A little small 380 or 9mm or a Smith & Wesson J-frame 38. Why? Because it's small and his wife's small and it's her gun. Okay, a couple of problems with this for home defense. Number one, if you're not concealing it, why a handgun? I know some people think handguns are great for home defense, but I just did a thing on handgun stopping power. You might want to make sure you're subscribed because this should come out before that. I plan on this coming out today, but handguns are far less effective at stopping people from doing evil than shotguns or rifles. Just period. They're far less effective. Not only are they round per round far less devastating, unless you get to some crazy example like a 500 Smith & Wesson versus a 22 in a rifle, they're almost certainly less effective round per round. Also, they're one of the hardest firearm categories to master and shoot well. A lot of police officers struggle at getting good hits at 25 yards with a handgun, and as a police officer, I could take most 12-year-old girls with any kind of decent carbine rifle, and I'm confident that the majority of those I could have hitting a silhouette target with that carbine in a matter of an hour or less. They're far harder to master, and they're far less effective, arguably, round per round. So first of all, if you're doing that, why would you go with a handgun? Second of all, if you decide you do want to go with a handgun, it's easier to secure, whatever the case might be. If it's not concealed carry, if you're not concealed carrying it, if she's not getting it for concealed carry, why are you getting a small handgun? And I see this all the time, and no offense to the ladies, but I've been a professional firearms instructor. I've taught military, law enforcement, and a lot of civilians. And I saw a large swing, and I'm very blessed that when I first started becoming a firearms instructor for civilians years and years ago, it was mostly men. And then I saw a large swing with a lot of women, and I think that's great because sadly, women are more likely to be the victim, I think, statistically, of a violent crime. I'm happy they're armed. If it's not a concealed carry gun, and a woman's searching for her first handgun, I would often give them this example. Okay, I have both these handguns, and I would put on the table or whatever a full-size 9mm handgun and a super subcompact micro 9mm. I say, okay, now if I put these both on the table and I were to lay them on the table and then slap the triggers back with nothing holding them, which one of those guns is going to fly back farther? Now logically, the super small subcompact is going to fly back farther. It's got less mass holding it down. Now imagine both of those are in your hand. Which one is going to recoil more? The small one. The small one is going to recoil far more than the big one. The smaller handgun is, in general, going to be harder to shoot, harder to manipulate, harder to get hits with, going to have less capacity, and it's going to be more punishing to shoot. Now there's a place for a woman to have a small, concealed carry handgun. But if it's for home defense, get the full-size fighting handgun. It's going to be easier for either one of you to shoot and get hits with, almost certainly, unless there's some weird anomaly. Like she's, 90 pounds and you're getting a Mark 23, which is jokingly referred to as the crew-served handgun. Unless you go to the ridiculous extreme, it's going to be far easier for her to get hits and defend with a full-size fighting handgun. So whether it's male or female, if you're getting a home defense handgun, the concealed carry gun is not that. Now if you're just getting into the world of firearms and you decide you want to start off with a handgun, it wouldn't be my first choice, but if you decide you want a gun that's going to do both, you're going to carry it all the time when you're out and about and carry it in your home, and you want a compact or subcompact gun for that, I'd say okay. But realize you're giving up a lot. If you're talking about home defense, usually for far cheaper you can get a decent, reliable pump in 20 gauge or 12 gauge for probably less money, and it's going to be far more effective. And since we touched on shotguns there, I do believe that a shotgun is the best home defense weapon. I know a lot of people will dissent from that. That's okay. You heard a little bit about the bio, about what God's blessed me to do in life, and this comes from my training and experience. When it comes to stopping power, like let's say inside 150 yards, but let's say for this, well inside 50 yards most of the time for home defense, nothing common, unless you're talking about like a 50 BMG, which is pretty impractical for home defense, nothing common is nearly as devastating as a 12 gauge shotgun. Nothing. I don't care what the news or media or whatever would have you believe about the scary black rifle, the AR-15, that just deals out death indiscriminately on its own without an evil person behind it. Like, that's not real. The AR-15 is actually a fairly light round in the rifle world. Like, if you look at the spectrum of rifle cartridges and effectiveness, it's pretty low on that graph of effectiveness. Now, still far more effective than a handgun, and we'll get to that. Not a bad choice, but round for round, certainly, I would say not nearly as effective as a 12 gauge shotgun. As a police officer, I worked some specialized assignments. I had access to many weapons. I had access to full autos. I had access to full auto Car 15, one of the variants, and literal Thompson submachine guns, because we still had them in inventory from way back in the day, and patrol rifles, whether they be the AR type or the Mini 14 type, and all kinds of things. Most of the time when it came to clearing a house, clearing a building, and I wanted to stay breathing when I got to the other side, I picked a shotgun with buckshot and slugs. Now, mission dependent, some missions I would take a carbine, but the majority of the time I think a shotgun is the better weapon for those kind of home or clearing building scenarios. Because I don't care what looks cool on Instagram or whatever, it's the best tool for the job. So for you, for home defense, I think it's the best tool for the job. Let me dispel a big myth. Not birdshot. Not birdshot. That is not a home defense. I had the displeasure of going to a call where a man was shot at contact distance, center of chest, with a full payload of birdshot. It was nasty, but I was far less than impressed with the ballistic performance of that round. Also, Not to pick on any politician's political sides, I really don't care. But when Dick Cheney shot his buddy in the face with birdshot, he lived, and he gave a statement not long after that. What more is that not enough to show you that birdshot is not an effective home defense tool? May it stop an attacker? Yeah, it might, but if you're looking for less lethal, there are less lethal options for the shotgun. It's one of the great things about a shotgun. Birdshot is neither hot nor cold when it comes to this, so I spew it out of my mouth. I don't want birdshot for home defense. A birdshot's good for a lot of stuff. It's good for practice. It's good for shooting clays. It's good for getting your lead down. It's good for hunting small game. It's not for home defense, in my opinion. You do what you want. May it stop an attacker? Yeah, but an airsoft gun with some black spray paint on the tip may also stop a home invasion, but I'm not going to count on it. Not the right tool for the job. What do I recommend for home defense loads? My number one go-to is number 4 buck. Not number 4 birdshot, not a turkey load. Number 4 bird, number 4 buck are not the same thing. Number 4 buck. I really, really like number 4 buck. It's my preferred load. I have done a lot of hunting with number 4 buck. I know that the trend is double-aught buck, and double-aught buck is fine. If you decide you want double-aught buck, rock on. It's a great choice. It's a standard military law enforcement load. It's a good choice. Number 4 double-aught. If you want to split the difference, look at maybe number 1 buck. If you're talking about 20 gauge just because of the way that spherical balls stack in a cylinder, number 3 buck may be more common. But any of those. And a pump or semi-auto, because reasonable rate of fire and reasonable capacity. May you get into a home defense scenario where you need more than 5 to 7 rounds or 10 rounds of buckshot. And just a side note, I'd have a slug or 2 in the side saddle for a shell exchange drill in case I wanted to get through some cover or barriers or whatever, or stop a vehicle. But it's hard for me to envision a realistic home defense scenario where you need more than 7 to 10 rounds of buckshot and slugs. That's a pretty gnarly home defense scenario. Shy of communist paratroopers jumping down, probably not really realistic. A shotgun, and you don't have to overthink it. A good, proven design, 20 gauge or 12 gauge, pump or semi-auto, that you've loaded, practiced, patterned, that's a great home defense choice. With a buckshot, and again, you may want some slugs situationally dependent. You may even decide you want a less lethal option. There may be people in your household, probably not you if you're listening to this, but you may have somebody in your household, they just decide, I'm just not going to take a human life. I'm just not going to do it. And some people are like that. And I'm not going to criticize that. If you look at that movie, Hacksaw Ridge, based on a true story, one of the few movies I've seen in recent years. Good movie. That man was a brave man. I'm not going to say he made the wrong choice for not wanting to take a human life. You may have somebody like that. That shotgun gives you the ability for less lethal. Beanbag rounds, rubber buckshot rounds. I'm not saying that should be your go-to for home defense, but I'm saying for somebody that's not going to use lethal force, that at least gives you an option for home defense. Let me talk about another one. The carbine. AR-15, America's rifle. They're a good rifle. They're especially good for this. I think they're probably better than this than they are for warfighting, as somebody that's been to war with them a couple times and done some contracting work with them. I think they're probably better in a CONUS role, continental U.S. In a like this home defense where they're going to be clean and kept tidy, and you go to the range and sight them in and train with them and then clean them and then keep them ready. I think that's probably a good place for these. Your standard magazine, not a high capacity, your standard magazine for an AR-15 is 30 rounds. That's plenty for home defense. Some advantages here, they are a lot less punishing in recoil than the shotgun. The shotgun can be pretty punishing in recoil. If you have somebody that likes to shoot the carbine and just has no interest in the shotgun because of whatever reason, carbine's fine. I would certainly say it's better than a handgun. It's a lot easier to shoot, and it's still far more effective than the majority of handgun rounds. One thing I see here, though, that I would caution you on is not using green tip. Green tip is what the military uses for military purposes. This is not a military application. You are not trying to pierce light armored vehicles. You are probably not, again, barring some communist paratrooper invasion, trying to stop some Toyota Hilux with a vehicle-borne IED, like the military might be doing, where penetration and stopping an engine is a thing that we deal with from time to time in the military. That's not the scenario you're in. The green tips are meant to penetrate. They're penetrating rounds. I don't think that's the right application. One, they penetrate a lot, which you can see why in a home defense scenario that may not be good. Also, they're not known for their terminal effectiveness. They're not known for that. They're not known for being a great stopping round. The military uses them for reasons that probably don't apply to you in a home defense scenario. If you're talking about this, I would say lean towards the lighter end, higher velocity, because they tend to lose their integrity when they hit a barrier, which is a good thing for you if you're trying to not over-penetrate walls and things like that. Something like a 55 grain is a pretty standard loading and pretty good. You may want something like a 55 grain, even polymer tipped round, whether that's an actual ballistic tip, which I believe Nosler is patented, or Hornady, they're polymer tipped, or any other similar round like that. Spear Gold Dot makes a 55 grain round, or at least they did last I checked, and Federal makes the True Tactical Rifle Urban. That's kind of my go-to. But get that gun, zero your weapon with it. Just plain iron sights for this is fine. A white light I think is really critical here, because you're talking home defense. You're going to want a white light. If you had a white light and iron sights and a sling, I'd say good to go. If you wanted a red dot, I'd say that's a little bit better, provided you have some sort of co-witness in case you pick it up in the first time in 2 years and the battery's dead, or whatever the case might be. But some kind of co-witness with a red dot is a really good choice for this. And again, white light and a sling. I've had it come up, what about night vision? What about night vision? I'm not telling you not to have night vision, but odds of somebody breaking into your house and you being able to put on body armor and a night vision head harness and all that stuff while they're breaking into your house, I don't think you're going to have time for that. I really don't. I'm not telling you, again, not to have night vision for other purposes. There are certainly good applications for night vision. It's become a lot more affordable. If you want night vision, rock on and have night vision, but I don't think it's super realistic for home defense. If somebody out there has used night vision in a home defense shooting, let me know. I would love to hear about it. I would love to see that case study. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but it seems to me, from somebody that's been a professional door kicker in many different guises, I would have to be doing a pretty poor job to give you time from the time I got into your front door to wherever you were to let you get on night vision and get it turned on and get your weapon ready and everything. I would be wanting to grab my weapon and get it ready and take up a good defensive position, or move to contact, or move to secure other people in the house, children, whatever the case might be. Those few moments between the time that they enter your domicile and they get to you or a loved one, those are precious seconds, and I wouldn't want to give those up messing with night vision, getting it on, getting a head harness on, or whatever system you had. And one thing that people often forget about this, you can have a lot of issues with that if there's ambient light or lights come on. What if you are all ready with your night vision and he just flicks on the lights? Because you know your house. He doesn't. So if he just turns on a light, or whoever just turns on a light, that's really going to mess up your night vision. So anyway, I'm not telling you not to have it, but it wouldn't be like one of my go-to things for a home invasion. If you want more about the home hardening, home defense, again, please check out Alpha Male Podcast today. It's a whole episode on a bunch of the other aspects that go into home defense, home security, besides just the guns. But I thought I'm literally recording it this morning and plan to have it out soon, just because I thought it would be a good complement to that episode. And if you don't normally listen to Alpha Male, I hope you'll go check that out. gunfighters, if you listened to all of that, I really am humbled that you listen to the podcast, that you come here for advice. I'm blessed to be able to serve you. If you thought you got any kind of value in this or any other episode, hopefully you'll consider supporting. This podcast is kind of paying it forward. You can listen for free. If you get something out of it, hopefully you'll consider giving back. If this is a ministry that you feel called to support, I make no apologies in saying this is primarily a ministry. Mission statement being to make godly men strong and strong men godly. It's also a small business with the fees and everything associated with that. So if you want to support an American, small, employees number 1, myself, veteran operated business, if you think that's something you want to help out with, consider becoming a patron. There should be a link in the show notes. And if not, please continue to listen for free and don't feel guilty about it. Tactical tips of the day. The first one is going to be a product. I have no affiliation with this person or company or whatever, but they are pretty handy if your dry fire routine is getting a little stale. If you're new to dry firing every day, I would say focus on safety and the fundamentals. Focus on a smooth draw or whatever you're dry firing with, presentation. But if you've been dry firing day after day after day and your dry fire is getting a little, let's say, monotonous, you might try these dry fire training cards. And it's easy to remember, dryfiretrainingcards.com. I have them. They're pretty cool. They're some things that I probably wouldn't remember or think about dry firing unless I read the card. Just something that's not in my normal routine. So if you're looking for something, they're not that expensive. And if you dry fire a lot, again, I think can really give you some variety. Another thing I'm going to tell you about when it comes to carbines and doing super tight end CQB stuff. You got to test your carbine and things like that. But one of the, I would say, disadvantages for these for home defense or CQB type stuff is they have a very high height over bore for the sights, meaning the sights are much higher above the bore than a traditional, let's say, hunting rifle or a shotgun. This is good on a battlefield because it gives you a little bit more arc on that bullet and a little bit more maximum effective point blank range. However, that doesn't really apply to home defense mostly. If you're taking a really close shot, which may apply to home defense, that bullet is going to generally impact far lower than the sight. Let's say you have a red dot zeroed co-witness with your iron sights. And this is generally the case. You have to test this for your rifle, but let's say your standard M4 with a aim point or some sort of AR-15 with a red dot, whatever the case is. Talking about up close, double arms distance, which is not unheard of in a home defense scenario or a self-defense scenario. If you're aiming, you put that red dot right in the center between the eyes and the nose, right where you're supposed to, and you pull the trigger, and you do everything right and execute that shot and give a slow, steady press under stress. That round is not going to hit between the eyes and the nose. It's going to hit several inches lower. And if you're off a little bit left or right, you may miss entirely because that round is going to impact far lower. Because if you look physically, that barrel is far lower than the sights and it has not had time to rise into the line of sight. Go ahead and test this for yourself next time you're at the range. If you have to take that, hostage shot or whatever it is, a more precise shot where somebody's just sticking their head up above cover and you aim right at the top of their head because that's all you can see, you're probably going to throw around into the cover because you don't know about this tactical tip. If it's close, and you have to know what that is for you, but I would say inside 3 to 5 yards, and it's going to adjust rapidly after that. You probably want to aim just at the top of the head, like just at the very crest of the head, the very top of the head, or the top of the silhouette, and that will generally get you good solid hits right in a good eye box that we talked about. It takes some training because naturally you're going to want to put the red dot where you want the round to go, but in close distances that's not where it's going to go. So you need to train Yes, you should be training, if you're talking about arming yourself for home defense, aiming for the top of that head and getting hits in the center. Tactical tips of the day. The tactical verse of the day applies very much so, I think, to this episode. If a thief is caught breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed. If a thief is caught breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed. If the sun has risen on him, there shall be guilt. You should know what God says about when it's lawful to take a life and when it's not. When I was doing a Bible reading this morning, per the norm, Bible reading session, I came across a verse where it talks about the manslayer, whoever kills his neighbor unintentionally, not having hated him in times past. There's a difference between manslaughter and murder. There's times when it's authorized, per the word of God, to use deadly force. Not only authorized, but prescribed. You should know, morally and ethically, when you can take a life. And when you can't. Having the discipline to know when to not pull the trigger is very much a gunfighter skill. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.